The morning air outside the airport was crisp, and the sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. Inside the terminal, the place was already buzzing with travelers, rolling suitcases, and the echo of boarding announcements. Sasha Obama stepped through the sliding glass doors quietly, almost blending in with the crowd. She had grown up in the public eye, but today she just wanted to be another passenger, unnoticed, moving from one city to the next. She wore a light gray hoodie pulled over her head, a pair of comfortable jeans, and white sneakers. Her baseball cap sat low, casting a shadow over her face. She kept her sunglasses in her pocket, saving them for the long flight ahead. A leather backpack hung on her shoulder. Not designer, just something practical and simple. Sasha had learned over the years that dressing casually in public often gave her a bit of privacy. People might glance at her and think she looked familiar, but most wouldn't immediately connect her to the daughter of the former president of the United States. That anonymity was a small treasure, something she valued when traveling alone. She headed toward the VIP lounge, a place her ticket entitled her to use before boarding. She had arrived early, hoping to relax with a coffee and read a book while waiting. Inside, the lounge was quiet, with plush chairs, glass walls looking out over the runways, and the soft hum of background music. She found an empty seat near the window and set her bag down, pulling out her boarding pass to double-check the gate information. Moments later, a staff member in a neat uniform entered the lounge. The man's eyes scanned the room, pausing briefly on her. His expression shifted from neutral to slightly suspicious, though Sasha couldn't understand why. He approached slowly, his steps purposeful, as if he already had something in mind. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his tone polite but edged with something else. "Can I see your boarding pass and ID?" Sasha looked up and smiled faintly, thinking it was just a routine check. She reached into her bag and handed him both without hesitation. The staff member glanced at them quickly but didn't hand them back right away. Instead, he studied her face for a moment, then looked back at the documents, as though something didn't match. "This lounge is for VIP passengers," he said, emphasizing the word VIP in a way that made it feel like a test. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Yes, I am," she replied calmly. "My ticket says I have access here." The man looked at her again, still unconvinced. He didn't raise his voice, but there was a firmness to his posture. "We sometimes get people trying to sneak in," he said, his eyes narrowing. "Do you have any proof that you're entitled to be here besides this ticket? Maybe a frequent flyer card or membership?" Sasha blinked, a little surprised. She had already given him her ID and her boarding pass. That should have been enough. Still, she stayed polite. "I'm sorry, but that's all I have," she said gently. "It should be sufficient." Instead of accepting her explanation, the staff member frowned and stepped aside to whisper something into his earpiece. Across the room, another staff member glanced their way, then began walking over. The second staff member, a woman in her mid-30s, joined the conversation, looking Sasha up and down before speaking. "Miss, we're going to have to ask you to step outside for a moment," the woman said, her tone less questioning and more like an instruction. Sasha felt a flush of confusion rise in her chest. Around her, other lounge guests had begun to notice the interaction. A man in a suit glanced over his newspaper, and a couple in the corner lowered their voices to whisper. Sasha hated drawing attention like this. She took a slow breath and asked, "May I know why?" The woman gave a tight smile. "We just need to verify something. It's standard procedure." Sasha knew it wasn't standard. She had traveled enough times to know that no one else was being asked to step out for verification. But she also knew arguing in the middle of the lounge would only make the scene bigger. She nodded quietly, gathered her bag, and stood up. As they escorted her toward the door, she could hear faint murmurs from behind. One person whispered, I wonder what she did. Another said, maybe she's not supposed to be here. Sasha kept her head down, resisting the urge to turn around. She had grown up knowing that people often made quick judgments without knowing the truth, but it still stung when it happened. Once they were outside the lounge, the male staff member handed her ID back, but his expression didn't soften. Please wait here while we sort this out, he said. If it turns out everything checks out, you can come back in. She gave a small nod, though inside she felt a mixture of embarrassment and disbelief. It wasn't the first time someone had underestimated her, but it was always uncomfortable. The two staff members returned to the lounge, leaving her standing. Near the large glass wall that overlooked the terminal, people walked past, some glancing at her curiously. She could imagine how it looked, a young woman being removed from the VIP area by staff, now waiting alone. A few travelers slowed their steps to get a better look, and she noticed at least one pulling out a phone to record. Sasha thought about explaining who she was, but she quickly decided against it. Revealing her identity would change the situation, instantly, but not necessarily in a way she wanted. She didn't need special treatment, she just wanted fair treatment. Instead, she reached for her phone and opened her contacts. She dialed a number she rarely used for personal matters, but this morning, it felt necessary. Hi, Dad, she said quietly when the call connected. On the other end, Barack Obama's warm voice came through. Hey, sweetheart, you at the airport already? Yeah, she said softly, glancing at the lounge door. Something odd just happened. She explained the situation briefly, how she had been asked for her ID, then removed from the lounge despite having the right ticket. Her father didn't interrupt, but she could hear the subtle change in his breathing as she spoke. When she finished, he paused for a moment. All right, he said finally, his voice calm but firm. Stay where you are. I'm on my way. Sasha hesitated. You don't have to. I'm coming, he said gently but decisively. See you soon. As she ended the call, she leaned against the glass wall, her mind turning over what had just happened. She didn't know what her father planned to do, but she knew one thing for certain. The staff who had questioned her might soon realize just how wrong their assumptions had been. The hum of the airport continued around her, the rolling wheels of suitcases, the faint sound of boarding announcements, and the chatter of strangers moving to their gates. But in the midst of it all, Sasha stood quietly, a figure of patience, not anger, waiting for what would come next. The minutes felt longer than they really were. Sasha stood outside the lounge, her backpack strap held loosely in one hand, trying to look as though she didn't notice the curious glances from people passing by. She could feel the stares, the silent questions written on their faces, the way some slowed their steps to get a better look at her. A few even lingered nearby, as though waiting to see if something dramatic might happen. She was used to attention, but never in this way, not with the tone of suspicion still hanging in the air. Inside the lounge, she could see the same two staff members moving around. The man who had first approached her was talking to someone at the front desk, gesturing toward the spot where she had been sitting. The woman who had escorted her out was speaking into a phone, glancing toward the glass doors now and then. Neither of them smiled, and neither gave any sign that this misunderstanding was about to end soon. Sasha glanced at her watch. Her father would probably take a little while to arrive, even with security. She had hoped to spend this time quietly reading and sipping tea, but instead, she was standing out in the open like someone who had broken a rule. She tried not to let it show on her face, but the unfairness of it pressed on her. A middle-aged man in a business suit walked by, pulling a small suitcase. He slowed, looked at her for a moment, then leaned toward the man next to him. They kicked her out, he whispered, though not quietly enough. Sasha caught the words, even though she pretended not to. The man's companion shook his head and muttered something about rules. From behind her, a young woman's voice said softly, "Excuse me, are you okay?" Sasha turned to see a traveler about her age, holding a coffee cup and wearing a friendly expression. It was the first moment of kindness she'd felt since the whole thing started. "I'm fine," Sasha said with a small smile, not offering details. "Just waiting." The woman nodded but seemed to guess there was more to the story. Still, she didn't press. She gave Sasha a reassuring smile before heading toward her gate. Then, without warning, the male staff member from earlier stepped out of the lounge again. He didn't look annoyed this time, but neither did he look apologetic. "Miss," he said, "we've spoken to the front desk and the ticketing office. They can't confirm your VIP access." Sasha blinked. "What do you mean?" "My ticket clearly says—" He held up a hand. "I'm not saying you don't have a ticket, but access to this lounge is limited. Sometimes there are errors in booking." Her voice stayed calm, though she could feel her patience thinning. "So you're telling me that even with a business class ticket, I can't sit in the lounge because you think there's an error?" "It's not about what I think," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "We just follow procedures." She took a slow breath. "Then I guess I'll just wait out here." The man gave a curt nod and returned inside. As the doors closed behind him, Sasha could see him talking to the other staff again, both glancing at her in quick, dismissive looks. It wasn't long before she noticed a man with a phone aimed in her direction. He was pretending to scroll, but every so often he'd lift the phone and angle it toward her. Sasha turned slightly away, but she knew the image was probably already captured. The internet had a way of turning moments like this into endless loops of speculation, and she could already imagine the headlines if her name got attached. Still, she decided to do nothing. For now. The sound of an airport announcement echoed. Above her, "Attention passengers for Flight 322 to Chicago." She wasn't on that flight, but the call pulled her attention away for a moment. That's when she noticed two men in dark suits stepping into the terminal from the main entrance. They weren't walking like ordinary travelers. They were scanning the space carefully, their movements precise. A ripple of awareness seemed to pass through the area. A few passengers started whispering, pointing toward the suits. Some took out their phones. Then she saw the third figure walking behind them. Her father's tall frame was instantly recognizable, even in casual clothes. Barack Obama wasn't trying to draw attention, but his presence naturally did. People's heads turned. Some gasped. Sasha felt relief wash over her, but she also knew the next few minutes would change the mood entirely. The staff inside the lounge hadn't noticed yet. They were busy behind the counter, arranging things for the next wave of passengers. Her father reached her in a few long strides, his expression calm but focused. "Hey, sweetheart," he said warmly, giving her a quick hug. She smiled faintly. "Hey," he glanced at the lounge door. "That's where it happened?" She nodded. "Yeah. They asked me for ID, I gave it, and still—" He listened, not interrupting. His eyes shifted briefly toward the glass, where one of the staff members had finally looked up. The man froze for half a second, his expression changing from casual to shocked. He tapped the woman next to him, and she turned, her eyes widening when she saw who was standing outside. Within seconds, the atmosphere inside the lounge shifted. The two staff members stepped quickly toward the door, their earlier confidence replaced with a kind of nervous energy. When they emerged, both were smiling. But it was the kind of smile that came when someone realized they might have made a serious mistake. "Mr. Obama, we didn't realize," the woman began, her voice slightly unsteady. Barack gave a polite nod. "Good morning." His voice was even, without any raised tone, but there was a firmness underneath it. "I believe there's been some misunderstanding involving my daughter." The man swallowed. "Yes, sir. It seems there was a mix-up. Mix-up. Barack repeated quietly, as if weighing the word. She had her ID, she had her boarding pass, and yet she was asked to leave. The woman's eyes darted to Sasha, then back to him. We were just following procedures. He held her gaze. Sometimes procedures are used to justify poor judgment. The words weren't loud, but they landed heavily. Around them, a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance, watching in silence. One of the airport managers, alerted by the commotion, arrived breathless. Mr. Obama, I am so sorry for this incident. Please allow me to escort you both back inside. Barack didn't move immediately. What matters is how people are treated, not just when they're recognized, but when they're not. The staff members nodded quickly, murmuring apologies. Their earlier suspicion had melted into regret, and the room seemed quieter now, as though everyone knew this was a moment they wouldn't forget. Sasha stood beside her father, calm as ever, watching the way he handled the situation, not with anger, but with a steady, clear tone that left no doubt about the message. What had started as a humiliating moment for her was slowly turning into something else, a quiet lesson for everyone, watching. And as her father gestured for her to follow him back into the lounge, the staff stepped aside, their faces pale with the weight of what they had done. The whispers in the crowd grew louder, but they weren't whispers of doubt anymore. They were whispers of recognition, of surprise, and for some, maybe even a little shame, and Sasha knew this was only the beginning of the change in atmosphere. The air inside the terminal seemed to change the moment Barack Obama arrived. People who had been rushing to their gates slowed down. Some stopped completely, eyes widening in surprise. A few reached for their phones, not to cause trouble, but because it was hard to believe they were seeing him in person. His presence wasn't loud or demanding, but it carried weight, the kind of quiet authority that made people take notice without a single raised word. Sasha walked beside her father, her head slightly lowered. She could feel the tension in the staff members who had escorted her out earlier. Their polite smiles looked fragile now, like they might break under the weight of the moment. Barack kept his focus on the airport manager who had hurried over. So, he began in a calm, measured voice, my daughter was removed from the lounge even though she had her boarding pass and ID? The manager, a tall man in a navy suit, nodded quickly. Mr. Obama, this is a very regrettable misunderstanding. I can assure you it was not our intention. I'm sure it wasn't your intention, Barack said evenly. But intentions matter less than actions. And in this case, the action was to single out my daughter without reason. The two staff members who had been involved shifted uncomfortably. The woman clasped her hands in front of her. The man kept glancing toward the ground as if hoping not to be addressed directly. Passengers nearby were listening closely. A mother, holding her toddler, leaned toward her husband and whispered, She was in there earlier. I saw them make her leave. The manager gestured toward the lounge. Please, both of you come inside. We will make sure everything is taken care of immediately. Barack gave a small nod but didn't move just yet. Before we go in, I'd like to understand what exactly led to this. Was there something about her ticket? Something about her ID? Or was it simply a judgment made in the moment? The male staff member looked up, his voice low. Sir, it was busy and we've had some issues with people trying to use the lounge without proper access. He stopped mid-sentence, clearly aware that whatever excuse he offered would sound thin. Barack didn't raise his voice, but the way he paused made the man's words feel heavier. And did she not have the proper ticket? She did, sir, the man admitted quietly. Did her ID not match? Barack asked. It matched, the man replied, even softer this time. Barack let the silence settle for a moment before saying, Then I'm struggling to see why she was treated differently from every other passenger in that lounge. The female staff member stepped forward quickly. Sir, I truly apologize. I realize now it was a mistake. I didn't recognize her and... That's exactly the point, Barack said, his voice still calm but firm. You shouldn't have to recognize someone to treat them with respect. Every person who walks into that lounge should be given the same courtesy and trust until there is a real reason to doubt it." The woman's shoulders dropped slightly. The truth in his words was undeniable. A few people in the crowd nodded in quiet agreement. One older man nearby even said under his breath, "He's right." The manager, clearly eager to move the situation forward, said, "Mr. Obama, I promise we will address this with our staff immediately. Please allow me to personally escort you and your daughter back inside. We'll also provide any service you need to make your wait comfortable." Barack looked at Sasha. "What do you think?" She gave a small shrug. "We can go back in, but I don't want anyone losing their job over this." Her words seemed to surprise a few people, including the staff. The female staff member's eyes flickered with relief. Barack smiled faintly at his daughter's compassion before turning back to the manager. "No one needs to lose their job, but I do expect this to be a moment of learning, not just for these two, but for your whole team." "Yes, sir," the manager said quickly. They walked toward the lounge together. As the glass doors slid open, the quiet hum of the comfortable space returned. But it felt different now. Every person inside turned to look. Some whispered in surprise, others straightened in their seats. The staff at the reception desk stood quickly, greeting them with overly warm smiles. "Welcome, Mr. Obama." "Welcome, Miss Obama." Sasha smiled politely and followed her father to a corner table by the window, the same kind of seat she had chosen earlier before all this began. A server hurried over, offering menus and insisting that anything they wanted would be on the house. "Just some tea, please," Sasha said with a soft smile. Barack ordered coffee, then leaned back in his seat, lowering his voice so only Sasha could hear. "You okay?" "Yeah," she said, though she knew her cheeks still felt warm from the earlier embarrassment. "I just didn't expect all of this for a simple lounge visit." He gave a quiet chuckle. "Neither did I. But sometimes these small moments tell you a lot about how the world works." Across the lounge, the two staff members who had escorted her out earlier stood near the entrance, speaking quietly to each other. Every so often, one would glance toward their table, their faces a mix of nervousness and regret. Barack noticed but didn't call them over. Instead, he focused on making Sasha feel comfortable again, talking about her upcoming plans, her friends, and the event she was attending in the next city. Slowly, the tension around them began to ease. Still, word had clearly spread. Passengers passing by the lounge would slow down, peering in through the glass to confirm the sight for themselves. A few quietly took photos from a respectful distance. Then, after a few minutes, the airport manager returned with a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the table in front of Barack. "Sir, this is a formal written apology from our management, along with a complimentary pass for you and your family for future lounge access, no matter the airline. We hope you'll accept this as a gesture of goodwill." Barack thanked him but made it clear that the real value wasn't in a pass or a letter. "The most important thing," he said, "is that no one else has to go through this. Whether they're someone's daughter, someone's son, or just a traveler trying to get to their destination." The manager nodded earnestly. "I understand." Sasha sipped her tea quietly, watching her father handle the situation with calm authority. She had seen him speak to world leaders, to crowds of thousands, but in this small corner of an airport lounge, his words felt just as powerful. The rest of the time passed without incident. They chatted, enjoyed their drinks, and when the boarding announcement for Sasha's flight came, they stood to leave. As they walked toward the gate, Sasha noticed something. The same two staff. Members who had doubted her earlier were now watching her with expressions that were completely different. There was no suspicion anymore, only sincerity. The woman gave a small, respectful nod. The man murmured, "Safe travels," his voice low but genuine. Sasha returned the nod, offering a polite smile. She didn't need them to feel small or ashamed. She just hoped they remembered this moment the next time they had to make a decision about someone. As they reached the gate, Barack turned to her and said quietly, "You handled that with a lot of grace." "So did you," she replied, smiling. Neither of them knew that videos of the moment he arrived were already spreading online, carrying the story far beyond the walls of the airport. But that part would come later. For now, they walked onto the plane, leaving behind a lounge that would not soon forget what had just happened. The plane had just begun to taxi when Sasha leaned back in her seat, finally allowing herself to breathe a little easier. The tension of the airport had slowly started to fade, replaced by a sense of calm. But she couldn't stop thinking about the staff back at the lounge, the two who had singled her out, the manager who had apologized so quickly. She knew their day would feel different after this. Some moments in life changed people, even when they didn't realize it immediately. Her father noticed the faraway look in her eyes. "Thinking about them?" he asked softly. Sasha nodded. "Yeah, I hope they learned something from all of this. Not just about me, but about how they treat others." Barack smiled faintly. "People often learn best through moments that matter, not lectures. And this definitely mattered." She smiled back, feeling a little of the weight lift from her shoulders. She had felt embarrassed and frustrated earlier, but seeing her father handle the situation with such calm authority gave her a new perspective. It wasn't about punishment or shame. It was about learning respect, dignity, and fairness. Back at the lounge, the two staff members stood awkwardly near the entrance, talking quietly among themselves. The woman ran a hand through her hair, looking down at the floor. "I can't believe we treated her like that," she said in a low voice. The man beside her nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know. I don't know what came over me. I've been working here for years, and I've never doubted someone like that before." "She didn't do anything wrong," the woman said, her voice barely a whisper. "And we made assumptions based on what? What she looked like? Who she is?" He shook his head slowly. "It wasn't right. And now, I feel awful. I can't stop thinking about it." The manager, who had returned to the lounge after escorting the Obamas to their gate, approached them. "I need both of you to understand something," he said gently but firmly. "What happened today is serious, not because of the mistake itself, but because of what it represents. We have to treat every passenger with respect. That's not optional. It's our job." Both staff members nodded, looking embarrassed but attentive. They realized that the apology letter and the complimentary passes weren't just about keeping the Obamas satisfied. It was a message, a lesson they needed to carry with them. Meanwhile, passengers who had witnessed the scene were talking quietly. Some expressed admiration for how calmly Barack Obama handled the situation. Others mentioned that it was a reminder that people should be treated equally, no matter who they were. Even the travelers who had initially watched with curiosity were now sharing the story with one another. Back on the plane, Sasha shifted in her seat, glancing out the window at the clouds rolling by. She felt a sense of relief mixed with pride, not for herself exactly, but for the way things had been resolved. She realized that a single moment could teach more than hours of discussion. It could make people reflect, feel regret, and decide to do better next time. Her father reached over and squeezed her hand. "You know, some people will never see the lessons right away. But actions like this, how you and I handled today, they plant seeds. Someday, someone will remember it, and it will matter." Sasha smiled. "I hope so. I hope they remember more than just the embarrassment." "They will," he said. "People remember moments when someone stands calmly, speaks clearly, and doesn't let anger take over. That's how change begins." Back at the lounge, the manager called the staff together. "I want you both to think carefully about how this situation unfolded," he said. "We can't change what happened, but we can change how we approach Every passenger from now on. Do you understand? Yes, sir, the woman said. Yes, sir, the man echoed. I want a report on what you learned from this incident, the manager continued. And I expect you to share that with the rest of the team. It's important that everyone here understands the impact of their decisions. Both staff members nodded again. They had never felt more aware of the weight of their responsibilities. A simple decision, one small judgment call, could affect someone's day, their dignity, even how they saw themselves in the world. Outside the airport, security cameras had captured the whole sequence of events. By now, the footage had started making its way online, quietly at first. Videos showing Sasha standing politely but firmly, Barack Obama arriving calmly and addressing the situation, and the staff showing visible regret began circulating. Within hours, people were talking about it on social media, admiring the composure and the lessons it carried. Some posts focused on the embarrassment the staff had felt. Others emphasized the respect and calm that Barack Obama displayed, making it clear that handling situations with grace often mattered more than raising one's voice. Parents shared it with their children, teachers shared it with students, and professionals shared it as an example of leadership and integrity. Sasha's phone buzzed with notifications, not from the incident itself, but from messages from friends and family who had seen the story online. Many of them expressed admiration for how she had handled herself and how her father had stepped in. She smiled at the outpouring of support, but she didn't feel proud in a boastful way. It was more a quiet satisfaction, a recognition that fairness and respect had been restored. As the plane continued its flight, she thought about the people she had passed at the airport, the travelers who had watched in silence, and the staff who had made a mistake. She realized that everyone involved would carry this day with them in different ways. For some, it would be a lesson in humility and reflection. For others, it would be a reminder that even ordinary moments could become extraordinary when handled with care. Her father leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. You know, he said, we often think that our actions only affect us, but they ripple outward. Today, you and I didn't just handle one small situation. We reminded a lot of people about respect and fairness. Sasha smiled. I think I understand that now. It's not just about being upset or embarrassed. It's about how we react and what others learn from it. Yes, he said softly. Exactly. As they spoke, the flight attendants moved through the cabin, offering drinks and snacks. Some passengers glanced toward them with curiosity, others with admiration, though Sasha and her father remained focused on each other. The noise of the plane faded into the background as they shared stories, plans, and quiet conversation, leaving behind the chaos of the airport and the lesson it had delivered. Meanwhile, back in the lounge, the two staff members were still discussing what had happened. The man looked at the woman and said, I don't want to ever feel like that again. Like I made someone feel unwelcome or judged unfairly. Me neither, she replied. It hurt to see her treated that way. I never want to be responsible for something like that again. The manager stood nearby, nodding in quiet approval. That's exactly why this matters. Mistakes can be learning moments if we take responsibility and remember them. You both have a chance to be better every day, starting now. A few passengers still lingered near the lounge entrance, talking quietly, and some offered polite smiles to the staff as they passed by. The atmosphere had changed. It was no longer tense or suspicious. There was an air of reflection and maybe even a bit of humility. Sasha's flight landed safely in Chicago. As she collected her bag and stepped off the plane, she looked around at the busy airport, full of people rushing to their next destination. For a moment, she felt a connection to all of them. The travelers, the staff, the people watching quietly from a distance. They were all part of the same world, where small moments could carry great significance. Her father walked beside her, smiling faintly. Ready for the next adventure? He asked. Sasha nodded. I think so, and I think I'll remember today for a long time. Good, he said, because some lessons, even small ones, can last a lifetime. And with that, they moved toward the exit, leaving behind the memories of a lounge incident that had turned into a moment of learning, reflection, and quiet transformation. For Sasha, for her father, and even for the staff who had once doubted her. The next morning, news of the lounge incident had spread far beyond the airport. Social media feeds were full of posts about the calm and respectful way Barack Obama had handled the situation with Sasha. Videos and photos showed her standing politely while the staff had escorted her out, followed by her father's composed arrival. People everywhere were talking about it, sharing the story as a lesson in dignity, fairness, and respect. Back at the airport, the staff who had caused the misunderstanding were already at work. The female staff member, still feeling the weight of yesterday's events, approached the lounge desk early, determined to make things right. Her co-worker, the man who had also escorted Sasha out, was there too, looking more focused than she had ever seen him. The manager called them together. Yesterday was a big learning moment, he said. You both made a mistake, yes, but what matters most is how we respond from here on out. Our goal is to make every passenger feel welcome and respected. That's not negotiable. Both staff members nodded earnestly. They knew that the apology and guidance yesterday were only the beginning. Their actions today and every day after would define whether they truly learned the lesson. Over the next few hours, they put that lesson into practice. They greeted every passenger with genuine courtesy, carefully checking tickets and IDs without jumping to conclusions. They were more aware than ever of their own assumptions and biases, constantly reminding themselves to treat every person fairly, no matter how busy or stressful the day became. Meanwhile, Sasha and Barack had arrived at their hotel in Chicago. Sasha was tired from the flight but couldn't stop thinking about the previous day. It's strange, she said to her father as they entered the room. Something that started so badly ended up feeling like a lesson for everyone. Barack nodded, setting his bag down. Life works that way sometimes. People often learn the most from the moments that challenge them, and not just the people directly involved. Those watching, even from a distance, learn too. Sasha smiled, thinking about the travelers who had been in the lounge. She imagined the parents teaching their children about what they had seen, the employees reflecting on their work, and the strangers who had paused to watch the events unfold. Even small acts could ripple outward, affecting people in ways you might never know. The day went on, and the story continued to spread online. News outlets picked up the videos and wrote articles focusing on the lesson behind the incident. Comment sections were filled with people discussing the importance of treating everyone with respect, whether they were a celebrity, a child, or just an ordinary traveler. Many shared their own experiences of being judged unfairly and expressed hope that this story could inspire change in workplaces everywhere. Back at the airport, the lounge staff continued to feel the effects of the previous day. Some passengers approached the desk asking if they had seen the news story. The woman offered sincere apologies to anyone who had noticed the tension yesterday, and the man made a point of greeting every traveler with extra politeness. Both realized that respect was not just about following rules, it was about how you made someone feel. Over time, the lounge became known as a place where everyone was treated fairly. The staff's transformation didn't go unnoticed. Travelers who had been hesitant about entering a crowded lounge now felt welcomed. Many people shared their positive experiences on social media, praising the staff for the change in attitude. For Sasha, the experience stayed with her. She reflected on how quickly things could change, from feeling unfairly treated to seeing the people who had caused her embarrassment genuinely learn from the situation. It reminded her that patience, understanding, and calmness could transform even the most difficult moments. Barack observed his daughter's thoughts. It's good to see you thinking about what happened, he said. But remember, what really matters is how we carry these lessons forward in our own lives. How we treat others, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable, is what defines us. Sasha nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She thought about her own actions, about staying polite, composed, and patient, even when she felt wronged. That calm had made a difference, not just for her, but for the staff, the passengers, and everyone who witnessed the events. Weeks later, the airport management reviewed the incident in a formal meeting. They praised the staff for their handling of the situation after the initial mistake. "Mistakes happen," the director said, "but what matters is learning from them." This team demonstrated growth and understanding, and that is exactly what we want in our employees. The staff members felt proud but humbled. They understood that trust and respect were fragile and had to be earned continuously. One of them even suggested conducting regular training sessions on customer service, emphasizing empathy and fairness. The manager agreed, recognizing that a single incident could teach lessons that would benefit many people in the long term. For Sasha and her father, life returned to normal, but the story of the airport incident stayed with them. They occasionally heard from friends and acquaintances who had seen the videos online, all of whom praised the way Barack handled the situation and how Sasha had responded. It became an example they shared when teaching others about respect, patience, and the impact of actions. One afternoon, months later, Sasha found herself thinking about that day again. She realized that what had started as an uncomfortable and unfair situation had turned into something much larger. It had taught her about grace, responsibility, and the quiet power of calm leadership. More importantly, it showed her that mistakes, when acknowledged and learned from, could lead to growth, understanding, and positive change. Barack noticed her thoughtful expression. "Thinking about the lounge?" he asked gently. "Yes," Sasha replied. "I think about how one small moment changed a lot of people, and how everyone has a chance to do better if they choose to." "That's right," he said. "Life is full of lessons. Some are obvious and some are quiet. But if we pay attention, they can guide us toward being better every day." Sasha smiled, feeling grateful for the experience, despite how uncomfortable it had been at first. She had learned about patience, forgiveness, and understanding. Lessons she knew would stay with her for the rest of her life. In the weeks and months that followed, the airport staff continued to improve, and travelers noticed. Many wrote letters to management praising the changes, explaining how welcome and respected they felt. Other employees shared stories of the lesson they had learned from the incident with Sasha Obama. The ripple effect of that one event reached far beyond. The airport lounge, Sasha herself carried the lesson into her own interactions. At school, with friends, and in everyday situations, she remembered how being calm, polite, and understanding could turn tense moments into opportunities for learning. She saw that patience and grace could influence not just one person, but many, sometimes in ways that were impossible to measure. Her father watched her growth with quiet pride. "You handled that situation with more maturity than most adults would have," he said. Sasha laughed softly. "I had a good teacher, and that teacher will always be with you," he replied, smiling. "Not just me, but the lessons of respect, fairness, and calmness. They can guide you in every situation." The incident at the airport became a story that Sasha and Barack would reflect on for years. It was not just about what had happened in the lounge, but about what people had learned from it. It was a story about fairness, humility, and the power of calm leadership. It reminded them that even the smallest moments could have a lasting impact. Through it all, Sasha and her father stayed connected to the idea that respect and fairness were not just words but actions. And the airport lounge, once a place of embarrassment, had become a symbol of growth for the staff, for the passengers, and for everyone who heard about the story. It was a moment that showed how people could change, how actions could ripple outward, and how one simple incident could become a powerful lesson in dignity and respect. Sasha and Barack Obama left the airport that day, knowing that even small acts of kindness, understanding, and calmness could create a better world, one person at a time. And in that way, what had started as a small, difficult moment ended up leaving, a mark far larger than anyone could have imagined. A lesson that would last a lifetime, not just for Sasha and her father, but for everyone who had witnessed the events, and even for those who would hear about it later. A story of fairness, empathy, and the quiet power of doing the right thing.